So now only I can see you at this point, Leslie. I haven't
Okay.
I haven't changed
Okay,
presenter
good.
view yet. I think only I can see you. Um, so good morning, good
It went the.
afternoon, everybody out there. Now you're backlit.
It's all right.
Okay, so welcome everybody to the Past Women in Technology May webinar. We are lucky enough to have Leslie Andrews with us today. We will get to her presentation in just a second. I want to thank you for being here today. You could be doing anything with your lunch break, but we're glad you chose to spend it with us. The Past Women in Technology group has two sponsors every year. So one is Century One and the other one is Redgate. And so we thank them every month for their generous sponsorship of the PassWit virtual chapter. And so as a result, two different attendees today will win either Visa or Amazon gift cards, one from each sponsor. You can check us out on YouTube. Don't try to memorize that link. Just do a Google search for a YouTube search for PassWit, and you will find us. And yes, this session is being recorded, and I will have it uploaded by the end of the day. Make sure that you check out our homepage, wit.pass.org. That has all of our upcoming webinars listed. It has all upcoming women speakers at SQL Saturdays and pre-cons and summit and things like that. Join the virtual chapter and get our monthly newsletter where we highlight a blogger every month. We provide some great articles and information, and we don't harass you more than that. Please follow us on Twitter at PassWit or follow the hashtag PassWit. We like to highlight women speakers there and news stories and things like that. And if you find something that you think would be interesting to the membership, please tweet that and use the hashtag PassWit. Coming up, we have SQL Saturday Rhineland and Santo Domingo. Dallas is June 1st. Leslie, when are you speaking when is your next SQL Saturday?
I am at Dallas.
Oh, nice. Hold on. Oh, sorry. So my screen right now, I have the navigation pane for GoToWebinar, so I can't see the names. But now I see a perfect 10, the data model, and that was the one
Yes.
that I saw the snippet of at Speaker Idol, and I loved it. It was fantastic. So you did a great job.
Thanks.
Let's see. And SQL Saturday South Florida has a pre-con that has a female speaker on it, and probably a half a dozen women speakers. SQL Saturday Columbus is coming up, as is SQL Saturday Virginia Beach, where I will be, except I have not bought my plane ticket yet, so I should probably get on that. So coming up in June is Kathy Kellenberger, and she is my co-leader of PassWit. She also works for Redgate. And that session is What is DevOps and Why Should DBAs Care? And that is Wednesday, June 19th. You can register by either going to wit.pass.org or going to your pass.org account and looking in my groups and finding it that way. And then scheduled for July 19th is Install and Configure SQL Server with PowerShell DSC. One of the young men who works for me mentioned how much he loved the session, what he got out of it, and how he immediately, when he went back to work, was able to put things to use, grabbed some information from it, and even sent it to coworkers. So he recommended it, so I immediately messaged Jess, and she was nice enough to say, sure, she'd do it for us. Today's session, Leslie Andrews, The Power of Data, the Complete Beginner's Data Warehouse Kit. And I will turn it over to her shortly. If you have questions for Leslie, please just type them right there into the question pane, and I will try to get that question to her in a natural break. I'm going to try not to interrupt her. So let me turn this over to you, Leslie.
Okay.
Awesome. I think we're good with you. Right?
I think so.
Awesome. There you go.
Do y'all see my slide? I hope.
Wait, sorry, I was muted. I see your slide deck.
Okay.
I see you,
Okay.
the bookshelf, and some other stuff. So yes, we're good.
Okay. All right. All right. We're all good. Okay. Awesome. I'm so glad that you guys decided to spend your lunch with me today, going over the power of data and learning the complete beginner's data warehouse kit. Why? I think my clicker died. This is the Passive Wit virtual group. I'm super excited to be selected. My name is Leslie Andrews. I am the database architect for the City of Albuquerque Police Department. Before that, I was a database architect in healthcare. I've done trainings, implementations, special SQL projects at Epicube, which is a big data management tool for the electrical industry. I was a software developer manager and a software developer for the Bernalillo County Metropolitan Courthouse. I'm a frequent SQL Saturday speaker. I was at REES Atlanta just this past weekend. I will be in Dallas, not this weekend, but next weekend, and hopefully in Austin and Louisville later this year, fingers crossed. I was a Speaker Idol finalist at Summit in 2018. That was a whole lot of fun. I am an Idera ACE for this year. This is my first webinar, so it's a little different for me talking to my little stuffed animals that I have back behind my screen to help me feel like I have people here with me, but I will do the best that I can. And again, thank you for joining me. Our objectives today are to learn about the basics of data warehouses, the ETL extract, transform, and load process, and then some examples from the police department that we have used to make organizational improvements using the power of the data now that we can. So first, we're going to start with the basics of data warehouses. What is a data warehouse? Well, it's a system used for reporting and data analysis and is considered a core component of business intelligence. It is a central repository of integrated data from one or more disparate systems. And the key definitions in this is integrated data and disparate systems, because it's only once the data is in a single system that we can harness the power of it. So what makes a database a data warehouse? The structure that it has, the model, how it's the tables that it has. So you have fact tables, which has the granularity, the measurements of the business processes, and what you want to count. The dimension tables store all of the attributes and descriptions of the things that you want to count about or describe about that count that you've gotten. The who, what, where, when, and why of those values that you're collecting to report upon. So the other big concept in data warehouses are the changes that occur in those dimensions and how to track them. Today we're going to talk about type 1 and type 2 changes. These are there are several different types of changes that you can track, but these are the only two we're going to cover today. Type 1 change is when you completely overwrite the information and there is no history. And a type 2 adds a new row when a change is detected, and it creates indicators that show the expiration of the prior row and which one is current. So you need to have easy ways to identify that current record. You can have an is current flag, effective dates, or a combination of those methods. So how to tell when things have changed? By using the hash byte function. A lot of data warehouses that you will find will have a checksum in them. That was the standard for a long time until it was determined that it wasn't very deterministic in finding those changes. Sometimes data would change and the checksum wouldn't. So a lot of data warehouse developers are going back and changing all of those checksums to hash bytes because it's a much more effective way of calculating those changes. So where do you start? It depends on what you want to count. For me, I had to focus on a system that counted uses of force. The City of Albuquerque has a settlement agreement with the Department of Justice that says we will collect and report on a whole bunch of metrics and measurements based on the fact that our police officers had some issues in dealing with mentally ill people. And so the DOJ came in and said, you'll have to do this stuff. So for me, it was counting things about employees and uses of force. and specifically creating a 360-degree view of an officer so that when he had an incident, we could easily tell had he attended all of the required trainings, how many uses of force had he had in the past, did he have a lot of complaints, did he have a lot of accidents, how much overtime has he worked? How much sick leave or vacation time has he taken? And all of that information was in a whole bunch of different systems. So I had to figure out, first of all, how to get it all in there. And the first thing I had to do was work on that employee dimension and be able to tell who was in what position at any given point in time and their history. So other basic dimensions that you will probably find in a data warehouse are date and time, a location description or dimension. If you are working in retail, you'll have stores as the location for point of sale. You might have warehouses as types of locations. You'll have employees. You might also have customers, any type of peoples. And then you have to decide what changes you're going to track. So for me, my employee dimension, I ended up having the employee key and a primary key that's auto-incrementing within my table because you always need to have your own identifier. The source system or the business key so that I can tie the information in the warehouse back to that source system and be able to identify that record there. The name, title, rank, position, the organizational structure, who their supervisor was, when they were hired, their termination date. If they've been rehired, that was important for our HR department to know. Their employee status. Are they a current employee? We have some employees that have taken early retirement, so technically they're still employees of the city, but they're not actually active officers that are out in the field. Contact information, their cell phone numbers, their address, their emergency contact information, their user ID, so that I can tie them to the work that they've done in all of the systems that we have. So what I have are slowly changing dimensions. There are other types of dimensions, junk dimensions, rapidly changing dimensions. I have another talk on that. I'm trying to think of all that slide. But this is a slowly changing dimension, my employee dimension. I have two types of changes that I want to either track or not track. So when the person changes their emergency contact information or they get a new cell phone number, I don't necessarily need to know the history of that. I can just update their current record with the new values. There are other pieces of information that when that changes, I want to have the history, their supervisor, their assignment, their job, or their rank. So in my dimension table, as well as all of the other fields that I showed you, I have type 1 hash byte and type 2 hash bytes. So if the current values in the dimension don't match the current query from the source system, the hash byte values are going to be different and I'm going to perform an action. That action, again, depends on what kind of change I'm tracking. If it's a type 1 change, I'm just going to insert new records or update existing records using a merge query. If it's a type 2 change that I want to track and I have the history, I have some flags in there that indicate whether the record is current, the effective date, and the expiration date. And so there's a two-step process when a type 2 change is indicated with updating the current record to set is current equal to false and adding the expiration date, and then inserting a new record that has is current equal to true and the default date of the effective date being the date that it was inserted. Does anybody have any questions about the dimensions and tracking those changes?
None so far. You're good.
Okay, all right. So the employee dimension ultimately ends up looking like this with all of the attributes that I already had, plus this information here about the current date, the is current flag, the dates, and the type 1 and type 2 hash byte values. So what we end up with when we have a fact table surrounded by the dimensions. So this is called a star schema. All the dimensions are directly related to the fact table. There are no dimensions coming off of other dimensions, which is called snowflaking. My fact table in the middle has an ID field. It has foreign keys to all of my dimensions, and it has the measures that I want to count. This particular example is from an accident report form that we have. It has a key to the date and time the accident happened, the beat that it occurred in, the city, and the damage that occurred. So whether it was towed to disabling, the severity of the damage, and the extent. Any questions on that?
None.
Okay, so the benefit of having this schema when you're doing a report or analysis project is that you are only ever a single join away from any piece of information you want to know about that fact. And that makes the queries run very quickly. So the extract, transform, load, sometimes people refer to it as an ELT, extract, load, and transform. This is the bulk of what happens in a data warehouse. You have a source system, it can be a database, a spreadsheet, an FTP, an API, wherever it is that you're getting your data from. The extract, transform, and load, and then the load is into the data warehouse that you're creating, and then you provide the data to the users, and that can be through Excel, Power Query, Power BI, Tableau, whatever tools that you're using to get the data out of the warehouse to do analytics. So the ETL for most people is the black box that nobody really quite sure, how do you do that work? How do you get it out of the source systems and into the data warehouse and track those changes? So you create a staging table, you run a query that extracts that data from the source system into the staging table. Once you get the data into the staging table, you write a query that just grabs all of that, ordering it by the key or multiple key fields that you have in the source system. Then in the data warehouse, you're going to query that fact table where the is deleted flag is equal to 0, because sometimes people delete things out of source systems. We want to include that information in our data warehouse that this record existed at some point and was deleted. But when we're doing this load, we don't want to include it because it was deleted, and it would always get reinserted if we did that. So we exclude the deleted records, and we again order it by the source system keys. We do a full outer join on that key field, and that ends up giving us 3 different scenarios. When the key exists in the data warehouse but is missing from the staged data, that indicates that the record was deleted in the source system. When the key exists in both data sets, but the value of that hash byte field is different, then that indicates there's been some update or change to an existing record. And when the key exists in the staged data, but does not exist in the data warehouse, that indicates that we need to do an insert action. So what that merge join task looks like in the SSIS package, we have run this query that gets us this staged data. We have the employee ID from the source system, the employee name, their position, the department, and the hash byte value of the 3 fields we're interested in: employee name, position, and department. Then we have the information from our data warehouse. We have our ID field, we have the source system key, we have the employee's name, their position, department, which we can see in the data warehouse has been transformed into headquarters as opposed to the HQ abbreviation that our source system has. And then the stored hash byte. This is the hash byte value the last time the process ran. We can see that John Doe has had no changes. He's still the president at headquarters. we can see that Sam Smith, the last time we ran the load, was the assistant manager of human resources, but now is the manager of sales. We can see that Jane Doe is no longer in our source system, and Sally Sanchez is, but she's not in our data warehouse. So that indicates that we have no change on John Doe. Sam Smith has a change. Jane Doe has been deleted, and Sally Sanchez needs to be inserted. All right, so before we move on to the demo, were there any questions on the modeling piece? Yes and no.
Yes, no, sorry. When you were pulling in the stage data, are you filtering with the where clause, or are you pulling in all of the source data? For example, if your source table in production has 500 million rows, that can be quite a process to pull in.
Yes, so it depends on your ability to accurately identify in that source system if the record is new or changed in some way. If there's a last updated field that is always accurate, then you can just pull in anything that has been updated since the last time you did the pull, because then you know that those are the only records that you need to deal with. In my particular example, an officer can go back in our CAD 911 system to a case from several years ago and get a case number for it. So, and I don't have an accurate way of determining whether or not had changes been made. The tables that do the updates aren't reliable. So I actually pull in all of the data every time. It depends on your resources, the network, right? All of that, and how long it takes to do that process. But again, it just is dependent on your needs for getting that. Maybe you only do your pull once a day, and so you can handle that 500 million records because you're only doing it daily and there isn't anything else going on the network.
So I may have one more question. I'm asking for clarity.
Okay.
So while inserting, deleting, or updating the data, are the hash bytes being updated as well?
Yes.
Yes. Well, okay.
Yes.
Then
yep, we'll see that. We'll see that here in the demo.
Okay, nice. Okay. You are
cool.
free to go.
Awesome. Okay, so everything I use is on the Microsoft stack. I have SQL Server 2017. I have integration services installed. I have a SQL Server agent. If you're doing this in your work environment, you may need to get elevated permissions to have access to those tools to do this. I use SSRS to deploy my reports. I use Visual Studio with SQL Server data tools to do my development. I have database projects. I have an integration services project. I am a firm believer of using source control for database projects. Our database code and stored procedures and tables and views are integral to developing an application and should be treated and considered as important pieces of the entire puzzle and not just the database. It's important. So if you don't have your database in source control, I strongly recommend doing that. So what's in the demo? We've got a staging database, our data warehouse, our SSIS packages, and the SQL Server agent. So we will switch over to that real quick.
Okay, I can see the screen.
Okay, so here's my solution. I have both databases here and the SSIS package. I know I have Zoom it on here, but I don't use it very often, and I don't think I have it turned on. So we'll just go with what we got. So the CAD,
you know, I can, because this is just my laptop screen, I can see everything clearly, and I'm old.
Okay.
So I think
okay. Awesome. You're not old. Okay, so here we have our staging table. This is a pretty much the duplicate of the table in my source system. If you In your staging table, give it the same names as the source system. In the SSIS package, when you do the mappings, it knows these fields are the same and belong together, and it does that mapping for you automatically. So it just is a little time saver. So my staging table has the fields that are exactly like my source system about my 911. That's what we've got here is the little 911 system we're going to do. My fact table is the CAD call. CAD stands for computer aided dispatch. Anytime you call 911 and you fire department or the police come out, or they do a lookout for the drunk driver down the road, there's a CAD entered, and they track, that's how they track that, and then they do the automated dispatch to the officers. In my CAD fact table, I have my ID. I have a source system ID so that if in sometime in the future you get a new system, you can identify which records came from system A and which records came from system B. I have my source system key, and then I have keys to all of my dimensions. My date time key, here's my hash byte changes. I have a flag in my table for whether it's a be on the lookout for, because sometimes we want to exclude those things. I have another table in my production system that breaks it down to the CAD call units and the people that were in the unit. And that one I have a flag that indicates whether the officer arrived on scene or not, because when we're counting the work the officers do, I want to exclude the ones where they didn't actually show up on the scene because they don't get credit for those. And then we have the SSIS package, where we truncate our staging table, we extract our stage data into our source table. This one I have done as a fast mapping with the tabular view because the tables are the same. I load that into the staging table. Again, like I said, because the names are the same, it did all of this mapping for me. Once the source data is loaded, I have to go in and I have to update my dimensions. So let's say they created a new unit or a new call type since in the source system since the last time I've loaded it. I need to make sure that before I load my fact table, that the keys that I'm going to need to fill in for each of the values exists in the dimension table. So I use a merge query for the staging to get the 5 or 6 fields that make up the location dimension, the beat, the area command, the city name, and the XY coordinates. And then using the merge query, if it is matched, then update. And when it is not matched, then insert. So anytime it finds a new location before it loads the data warehouse, it updates all of the dimensions so that when we get to that, we have that data. So here is exactly what I showed you in that slide. We're going to get the staged data ordered by the source system key. We're going to get the data warehouse tables also ordered by, oh, there we go, the source system key where it's not deleted. So if we open this up, we're not deleted, ordered by source system key. You have to, in the advanced editor for these, go to the input and output properties. On the output columns, on the source output, this is sorted equals to true. And then you have to tell it which values are the ones you're sorting by. So I'm sorting by, in the output, source system key, sort key position 1. And when I look at the staged data, you have to go into the advanced editor, look at the source output. Call key is my source system key. It is also sort key position 1. Once you get that set and you go to your merge join, you have to change this from an inner join to a full outer join. If you have not done the sorting piece in those 2 pieces before, when you change this to full outer join, it'll give you an error message, it'll squawk and it'll say, oh, your stuff's not sorted, and you'll say, oh yeah, that's right, Leslie said we had to go and we had to do the advanced editor thing and put in the sort. So it will tell you if you haven't gotten it sorted yet. Once you get that full outer join, we're going to tell it what we're joining on. So our staged call key here is our join key to our source system key in the data warehouse. We have a list down here of the fields that are coming in, where they're coming in from. You can give it an output alias. So my data warehouse ID field, I can rename that DW_ID so that I know that this is the one that's coming from the data warehouse. So again, here we'll do data warehouse hash byte changes so that in our flows further down, we can see the difference between the staged query hash byte value and the data warehouse hash byte value. Then we're going to decide what we're going to do. And just like in the slide before, oh, it doesn't, I changed the name, so I have to, right, because now I named this DW hash byte changes. So new record if the data warehouse ID is null. A changed record if our current query hash byte changes is not equal to the data warehouse hash byte changes. And it's a deleted record if the source system call key is null. Didn't want to push cancel because now it's still going to be mad at us. Okay. So then we have what we're going to do for each of these. When you insert, we're going to use the parameters in the insert query using the question marks. So here are all the fields that I want to insert, and the values get the question marks. And then in our column mappings, we map those parameters to each of the values. The same thing on the update. I'm going to use the question marks for parameters. Here's where we're actually updating the hash byte changes to the value we've mapped here, which is the stage query current hash bytes. And we're going to use the ID field from the data warehouse to identify which row we want to update. So here, when we get down to the bottom, where ID equals question mark. So whatever record we're on, whatever ID that is in the data warehouse, that's the record that we want to update. And then on the deleted records, we have the flag that sets the is deleted to true. Again, it's just another update query. We're setting our flags, is deleted equal 1, last update time equal to the current date, where ID equals the question mark, and then again, we map that to the data warehouse ID. So this is the SSIS package that will get deployed. If we go and look in SQL Server, we can look at my fact table, DBO CAD call. We can see that it doesn't have any records in it. We can look at our location dimension. It's also empty. So if we come back over here and we start our process, we can see we should see something. There we go. So it truncated the staging table. It's extracting the source data. It filled in all of our dimensions. I have the data viewer enabled so that we can see what's going through. We can see that none of these exist in the data warehouse. When I close this, our job finished successfully. We can go into this and we can see that 8 rows came out of the merge join. We have 8 new records inserted. We can see we have eight locations, 8 calls to the 911. The location key ties back to the location key that we entered in our dimension. We have the date that the call was created, the time keys for all of the pieces of information that we're interested in. We can see some of them are not closed yet. We have the hash byte. So if we go and run this again,
Leslie, I do have a question, and I think I may have missed the window for it. But
okay, no,
what type of projects are the staging and data warehouse projects?
they are database projects.
Thank you.
Yes. So now when we look at our data viewer, we can see some of these have the data warehouse ID. So these are existing records. All of these that are null are the new records. We can look at the hash bytes, not seeing them. If you are finding that the data isn't being updated or inserted the way you expect it to, using this data viewer, so if you click on here, on this little blue line between them, that's what enables and disables that data viewer. That is a great troubleshooting tool for figuring out why it's not detecting what you expect it to. So if we come back over to the data warehouse now, we can see that we have 18 location keys. We have 18 calls. We can see that some of these were updated, right? Here's the created date, and it was updated the second time we ran it. We can see that the call is closed now. Any questions on the step-by-step of getting the data through this process and into the data warehouse? Okay. These are pretty easy to work with. Right-click deploy. This will deploy your SSIS packages to your SQL Server. The database projects, you do a schema compare. It allows you to select your project and your source system. You do the comparison. It will show you what's different between what you have in your project and what you have in the SQL Server, so that you can deploy those changes. And once it finds some differences and you select them and do the process, you can just update that and send those out to your database. It's actually very, very easy to get those in there, and the change management between for the comparison works really well. I like doing that. It's a little safer than just willy-nilly coming over here and changing stuff. So once you get that deployed, then we have here the integration services catalog. You have to click down a whole bunch to get to the things that you're actually interested in. So here is our package. You can set up different environments within your SSIS, so that if you have a production and test system, which I highly recommend, then in your project here, you can see, see, I compared staging to the warehouse. That's why it's got all sorts of stuff that it wants to change. But it'll let you delete tables and add tables, add and change columns. So you can set up the environments that if you are in your development, you're looking at test, and when you're in production, you have variables that pass in your production environments, so that it's easy to manage that and do development and not screw up production data. The SQL Server agent is how to call the package from the server. You can set this up with the steps. It can do multiple steps. The only issue that I have found with having multiple SSIS packages set up in the steps is that the alerts that come out are at the job level. And so you might have 3 or 4 SSIS packages within the same job, and 3 of them will succeed and 1 of them will fail, and it will send the notice about the one failure. And if it's the first one, then it won't do the other 3. And so I think having a single SSIS package per job allows the notification system to work better. But you tell it that it is a SQL Server package that you want to run. You can also do stored procedures through queries. You can do an SSAS command, PowerShell. The SQL Server agent job is a very powerful tool, not just for running the SSIS packages. Once you tell it that it's an SSIS package, tell it the server name, and you navigate to which package you want to go to. Select that. You can schedule it. Most of the jobs that I have running in my production system are every hour, but they are very, very small tables. My very large tables, the CAD systems, I have one of those that runs every 10 minutes with about 9 million records in it, and another one that runs every hour that has about 14 million records in it. I'm currently doing some query tuning because I've been attending some great SQL Saturday sessions, and so I'm making improvements to my system. This I have set up to run every 10 seconds as part of the demo. I tried to make it every 3 seconds to make it faster, but 10 is apparently the minimum. So I sing the Jeopardy song a lot when that's running. Oops, I was going to show the alerts. Actually, it's not alerts, it's notifications. So when the job completes, if you have the email SMTP database mail set up, you can select that database mailbox to be who's notified when the job fails. There's some other ways that you can set up that database mail. Mine is actually set up so that it's the data warehouse that owns that mailbox, and it sends mail to users and does other things other than just the notification. But if I start this job, it only has the 1 step, so it'll start at step 1. Started the job, and it's executing it. We will see that we get some more records in our table. This is where I usually sing the Jeopardy song. I should have had it recorded so I could play it in the background for us. Now I really do want to start singing it because it's taking an extraordinarily long time. I don't know what its problem is. See, this is one of the things that's different about the webinar is, I would usually chit chat with people, and there are no people to chit chat with. Oh, yay, success. So now when we look, we have more records. We have 50 records. We have 25 locations. And again, since this is staged data, it's getting a new location every time. In the real world, you would be reusing some of those locations, and so it wouldn't necessarily get a new one every time. We have our 25 calls. And then the last step is to automate this. So I'm going to reset my database. So now we can see that it's all empty again. I will schedule this or enable it. So this is when it will start running on the 10-second schedule. So we'll sit here and we'll twiddle our thumbs, or we'll look at cute cat videos, or go check our Twitter accounts and see if anybody's doing anything about how great my session is.
Your session is great.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And sometime in the next 10 seconds, we'll have data here. I promise.
They can all calm down.
Okay. Oh, yay. We got some locations. So we've gotten the dimension in. And now we got our calls. And now this is just going to continue to run every 10 seconds. So if I wait long enough and run this again, then we'll have our new data in. So did we have any questions about the ETL process? the pieces that I used to do this. Nope, we're all good. Okay, so now we're back. We got more locations, and it's just running along, and it'll run forever. Cool. All right then. Let's go back to here. All right. So in that demo, we did some basic transformations. We got the key values out of our dimensions. We didn't do this, but in my production system, I have some standardizations that I do. Lookup tables to convert the code. So ethnicity in our employee table is different than what one of our vendors uses for ethnicity for the officers and the civilians in that reporting system. So I have some lookup tables so that regardless of what the code is in the source system, when it comes into the data warehouse, the ethnicities are all standardized across all of our dimensions. I have some places where instead of having no data or unknown, right? Unknown is a valid answer on the questionnaire that we have given to the officer. What was the street like, right? Whatever those questions are, one of the answers is unknown. Well, that's a valid answer, whereas no data means they didn't answer it. There was no data there for the question that was asked. Cleanup. NA versus N/A versus N-A. Officers are notorious for putting in, no information here, which really is not really necessary in the data warehouse. I'm not interested in things where things didn't happen. I have the indicators. I have one that indicates whether it's a behavioral health call, whether it's the BOLO, the officer arriving on scene, any of those types of things that will make filtering in your preferred analytic tool easier, because you can get rid of those things that you're not interested in just based on the value of those flags. And again, pre-calculating those aggregates, that is really the big piece of the data warehouse process. So you want to count in advance how many officers were on this call, how much time was spent on it, those types of things. How much were your sales? Whatever the fact is that you're trying to capture and report on, as many of those things as you can pre-calculate, you can. So you have a sales table, daily sales. Well, but you want to report on that monthly. Well, maybe you have another fact table that has monthly sales amounts, and you've pre-aggregated all of that up to the month level so that when you go to report on it, it's faster and easier because you've already done all of those calculations in advance. So now that we've collected all this data from all of these different systems, what do? I like to think of myself as a catalyst for change, right? Because I may not be able to change the whole world, but I can change one person's world, and I've absolutely done that in my job, and it's a really great feeling. So that's what you need to do. You need to go and find the people that do all of that manual work within your organization and see if there are ways that you can help them do it easier, better, and more efficiently. So before we start on the good stuff, when I started working at the police department, I got this book. I was a certified Scrum Master at the time. I've let that certification lapse, but this is still a great book for how to get from the whiteboard to a dimensional model that will work for your organization very quickly. And I had visions of coming in and being this great data wizard and making the world a better place, like I said, right? It was a delusion. My organization had a negative data IQ. Nobody there knew what I was doing or how I was doing it or what it all meant. So what I've just shown you in the dimensional model is not what I have at all. What I have is a very wide reporting table structure, which works for our organization and does what we need it to do, but is not a true dimensional model. Luckily, though, the tools that we use for like Power BI allow you to create the dimensional model within your report there. So we've kind of been able to implement a dimensional model without actually having it in our source system. My boss's philosophy is do fast, go back, do right. Well, you don't always have time to go back and do right. So it is not a true data warehouse, but I don't want you to think that you can't have an impact because you can't go back and create a dimensional model. If all you can create are wide flat tables that have all of the information that you need in them, you can still have an impact. How much of an impact? For me, it's been great. I have some quotes here from some of the people that I have worked with. The real-time crime center solution that I built, it's a very easy SSRS report, refreshes every 15 seconds. It doesn't even use my data warehouse. It uses our CAD systems data warehouse because that was the best solution for getting that data for them. I didn't have all of what they needed. So I took another data warehouse, I built this report for them. Ultimately going to have a direct impact on officer safety, which is somebody that works at a police department. That's what we really want, right? We want our officers to go out and come back at the end of their shift every day. In a city where crime has risen to a new level, these changes are the tiny steps which will make a safer city a reality. I have a field sergeant who needs to know whether his teams have completed the reports, right? Knowing exactly where my team stands on such an important issue keeps him ahead of the curve, solving potential issues timely. Evidence unit. We are automatic tagging of files that are loaded up to evidence.com from the body cams. Officers saving tons of time and money. That's a big part, money. With the data warehouse, turned hours of time spent gathering data into seconds. That's huge for an analyst. This is a slide that I've gotten from Monica Rogati. She is a LinkedIn data scientist, and she's come up with the data science hierarchy of needs. And I like to say that everybody wants to be here. Everybody wants to be doing the AI and the machine learning. Everybody thinks they're here in the middle in the analytics and metrics and segments. Really? Everybody is still down here in the bowels of the pyramid, right? In the base where all of the data moves around and gets collected and cleaned. Everybody discards or disregards this piece of it. And it's the foundation of good data, is having a reliable data flow, infrastructure, and clean data that you're doing your analysis on. So here's my good stuff. Some of the things that we've done have compliance rates for whether or not policy directives have been followed and additional requirements fulfilled in the reporting. This is a report that shows the compliance rates for down to the person level. This is something that was not even a possibility before we started. There was just no way to track any of this information. The operational improvements, we have a missing reports reconciliation and activity logs that show the work that our officers are doing. They used to fill out a, this is the reports, ones that are missing, what the CAD number is, the case number, when it happened, whether they have the additional documentation required for the specific cases, and what to do about it, right? We want to tell them how to fix what they've done. This is the report that shows what our officers are doing, their calls for service, chief's overtime. I don't know about y'all, but here when the police are out directing traffic at the churches, that's paid for by the church. They get a bill from the police department for those hours. We call that chief's overtime. Traffic stops, accidents, accident reports, right? This shows us how many of the accidents they sent the person to the station to fill out. We know how many cases they were assigned, how many of their videos were reviewed by their supervisor, the behavioral health calls, the completion rate for filling out the additional documentation for that. Like I said, we have the auto tagging of the body cameras. We also are doing electronic file transfers to the district attorney's office. The attorney's office is always saying, oh, well, we couldn't prosecute that case because the police department didn't get us the files. Well, that's a lie now because we get them the files. We've done some basic stuff with R and some analytics with some average response times. We can tie these big drops and increases in the response time to policy changes that said, oh, you can no longer work overtime. Well, if you have to end at the end of your shift, well, then we've got an increase in response time because there's less officers on the street. This was a cool little report that allows us to see the number of seconds, between calls. Our CAD system does a really good job of intra-call data, how long between the things that happened on that call, but not such a great time of in between. So this officer logged on and waited for 8,079 seconds for their first call to be dispatched. That call ended and they waited 479 seconds for their next call to be dispatched on. And then we can see how long they waited from the time they cleared their last call until they logged off. This was really good for our operations department to be able to see how much time is in between the calls that our officers aren't, I wouldn't say not working, but waiting for the next thing to do. So what were some of the challenges that we faced in doing this? Undefined or poorly defined processes. If you can't tell me what you're doing and how you're doing it, it's going to make it very difficult for me to help you do it more efficiently. Bad data. Our PeopleSoft system has a reports to. My position reports to another position so that when the people in those positions change, then the relationship between the hierarchy is still there. Our HRP personnel can't keep that straight, and it's always wrong. The data is what the data is, but it is not correct in that source system. So people are always saying, this person doesn't report to me. Well, they may not in the real world, but they do in PeopleSoft. Common definitions. When somebody says, how many calls for service was that? What does that mean? We have the chief's overtime. We track for training, community meetings, the BOLOs. When I'm working with somebody that wants calls for service, what does that mean to them? Bad data. You can create the most beautiful, elaborate dashboards, and if your data is bad, you will be making bad decisions. Accountability. Who's responsible for gathering the data, using the data, making sure it is vetted and validated, going back and cleaning it once it's been discovered that it's incorrect? And finally, bad data. It will be the bane of your existence. It is not wrong. It is what's in the source system. It may not be what you are expecting, but it is what it is. So our goals today were to cover the basics of data warehouses, the ETL process, and explore the power of data. I hope that you've learned enough to go back to your organization and put into practice some of the things that we've talked about today. If you have any questions once you get back, please feel free to shoot me an email, and I'll be more than happy to do what I can to help you out. Thanks.
Sorry about that. So all done. Thank you so much. If you are still on, Bruce Spragg. Oh, I see. Sherry or Cherry Swinson has logged off. You guys won the gift certificates today, so expect an email from me. Again, I'll have this video uploaded by this afternoon, and you guys can check it out and feel free to share the video with everybody or look back at it as you have questions. And hold on, I just had one. You guys can. My dog has finally shown up and decided to whine. There's a lot of things coming in that say thank you so much, great presentation, appreciated this. Thanks a million, that it was very interesting. So I really, really appreciate you doing this today, Leslie.
Good, thank you, thank you.
Awesome. So everybody have a fantastic day and a happy Memorial Day.